The screams came from behind the steel door of SolitaryBlockD. They were sharp, echoing down the empty hall like metal scraping against bone. Officer Marcus Hall froze mid-step, the sound of his boots silenced by pure fear. It was the third night in a row someone had screamed like that, and every time the cell's camera went dark seconds before it happened. When Marcus finally gathered enough courage to look through the narrow slot in cell D7, his flashlight beam hit the walls, and there was no one inside. No body, no trace of blood, just deep scratch marks on the concrete, like someone had tried to claw their way out. The inmate, Eli Turner, had been serving time for armed robbery. But now, his name was about to be added to a list everyone in the prison whispered about but never dared to speak out loud. No one survives SolitaryBlockD. That night, Marcus called for backup. 2 other guards came running, and together they opened the heavy door. The second it creaked open, a blast of icy air hit their faces, and their flashlights flickered. The smell was thick, like rust, dust, and something faintly rotten. The cell was completely empty, but the scratches on the walls formed a shape this time, almost like letters. Marcus leaned closer. It looked like a name, Daniel, but there was no Daniel in that cell. The warden ordered them to seal Block D for the night, but Marcus couldn't sleep. He knew what he saw, and it didn't make sense. The next morning, the prison buzzed with rumors. Some said Eli escaped through the old drainage system. Others said the guards were covering up something darker. But Marcus knew the truth. He saw the security feed right before it went black. Eli had been standing in the middle of the room, holding his head, screaming. The camera glitched, and for half a second, there was another figure in the cell with him, a tall shadow standing perfectly still. By noon, the warden held a meeting. No one talks about Block D. No one goes near it unless ordered. We keep this quiet. But that afternoon, another prisoner, Calvin Reed, got violent in the cafeteria. He stabbed another inmate with a plastic fork and shouted, "Send me to D. I'll prove they're lying." The guards dragged him out, kicking and laughing like a man who had lost his mind. Marcus tried to stop it, but it was too late. Calvin was thrown into cell D7. Hours passed. Midnight came. The prison was silent. The guards were doing their rounds when, from the far end of the hallway, a faint humming sound started. It wasn't the usual electric buzz of the lights. It was more like a voice humming a tune. One of the older guards, Sanchez, recognized it immediately. It was the same tune Eli used to hum before he disappeared. Marcus and Sanchez rushed down the hall. The humming stopped. The cell door to D7 was shaking lightly, as if something inside was moving. They opened the small viewing slot and froze. Calvin was standing in the middle of the cell, completely still, his eyes open wide, his mouth moving as if whispering to someone. The camera above him blinked, and the feed cut out. The warden was called again. This time, he ordered all cameras in SolitaryBlockD shut off completely. No recordings, no more evidence. "It ends now," he said, but Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the words scratched into the wall. "Daniel." He went into the records room and began digging through old files, searching for any prisoner by that name. What he found made his hands shake. In 1978, before the prison was renovated, there had been an inmate named Daniel Croft. He was the first to ever be placed in SolitaryBlockD. The record showed that he died in that same cell, D7. But the report was strange. Cause of death: unknown. Cell found empty. Inmate never recovered. Marcus printed the file and hid it under his jacket. Later that night, thunder rolled outside, and rain began to pour. The sound of dripping water echoed down the prison hallways. Marcus sat alone in the security room, watching the monitors flicker one by one. And then, Block D's camera feed, which had been turned off hours ago, suddenly came back online. The image was dark, grainy, but someone was standing in front of the camera. Not Calvin. The figure was tall, pale, and facing the lens directly. It was smiling. Marcus leaned forward, his breath catching in his throat. The figure raised a hand slowly and pointed straight at the camera, as if pointing at him. The screen glitched again, and for a split second, words appeared burned into the static. "You're next." Marcus jumped up, the lights flickering overhead. He grabbed the nearest radio and shouted, "Control, do you see that? Block D camera just came online." Static. No answer. He looked back at the screen, and now the cell was empty again. But the door to D7 was wide open. That was impossible. He ran down the corridor, his boots slapping against the wet floor. The closer he got, the colder it became. His flashlight flickered, and the smell of rust returned. He turned the final corner and stopped. The cell was open, just as the feed showed. Inside, Calvin was gone. The walls now had new scratches, fresh ones. They spelled a single line: "No one survives." Marcus staggered backward, his heart pounding, the wind howling through the open hallway. He turned to call for help, when he saw something move behind him in the dark reflection of the metal door. A shadow, tall, still, watching. Then the door slammed shut. The sound of the steel door slamming shut echoed through the corridor like a gunshot. Marcus spun around, banging on it with his fists. "Hey, open up!" he shouted, but the thick metal swallowed his voice. His radio crackled once, then went dead. He hit it again. Nothing but static. The light above him flickered weakly, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. The temperature inside Block D had dropped so low his breath came out in white puffs. Marcus backed up toward the cell, heart racing, trying to stay calm. "It's just a power glitch," he muttered to himself. "Just a glitch." But when he turned toward cell D7, the air shifted. He could hear something faint, scratching again. Not on the walls this time, but from beneath the floor. He crouched slowly, shining his flashlight across the concrete. The light trembled in his hand. The scratches grew louder, closer, until something scraped the underside of the cell like nails dragging across metal. Then silence. Marcus stood frozen. His radio hissed once more, and through the static, a voice whispered, broken and slow, "Daniel is not gone." The flashlight went out. Panic set in. He slammed the side of it, and the beam flickered back, only to reveal that the words on the wall had changed again. The fresh scratches that once read, "And no one survives," now stretched across the wall, continuing further. "No one survives SolitaryBlockD." Marcus stumbled back. His chest was tight. Then, from the far end of the hall, a loud clang echoed, like another cell door opening by itself. He ran toward it, shouting, "Who's there?" The corridor lights flickered in rhythm with his footsteps. One by one, the cell doors on both sides of the hall began to creak open, each revealing nothing but darkness. He reached the last one, D10, and stopped dead. Inside stood a man. He was barefoot, wearing the old tan inmate uniform used decades ago, before the prison switched to orange. His head was tilted slightly, and though the light barely reached his face, Marcus could make out pale, cracked skin and a faint, crooked smile. "Who are you?" Marcus demanded, voice shaking. The man didn't answer. He stepped forward slowly, his bare feet making no sound against the cold concrete. Marcus aimed his flashlight straight at him, and froze. The man had no eyes, just deep, hollow sockets. Marcus dropped the flashlight in horror. The beam rolled across the floor, landing on a faded name tag still attached to the man's uniform. "Croft D. Daniel," Marcus whispered. The figure smiled wider, and a faint whisper filled the air, not from his mouth, but from everywhere around the cell. "You opened my door." Marcus backed away fast, fumbling for his radio again. "Control, I need backup. There's someone." But the words cut short as the lights went completely out. He was in total darkness now. He could hear the breathing, not his own, someone else's, slow and steady, right behind him. Marcus froze. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. He turned around slowly. Nothing, just the faint glow of the flashlight lying several feet away. He lunged for it, and as soon as his fingers touched it, a cold hand grabbed his wrist. Marcus screamed, yanking away and swinging the light. The beam hit a wall of fog that hadn't been there before. The air was thick, heavy, like the cell itself was breathing. And then, From within that haze, multiple figures began to appear, blurry at first, then clearer. They were inmates, all of them pale, drenched in shadow, faces twisted in pain. Their uniforms were old, some from the 70s, some from years later. Marcus recognized one face immediately, Eli Turner, the man who vanished days ago. Eli's lips moved slowly. "He doesn't let us leave." The other figures began to whisper in unison, their voices overlapping. "No one survives? No one survives." Marcus stumbled backward until his back hit the cold wall. He pressed his hand against the emergency button near the cell, but it didn't work. Sparks flickered and died. Suddenly, the hallway lights flared back on. The figures vanished. Everything looked normal again. Marcus was breathing hard, drenched in sweat, flashlight trembling in his hand. He blinked rapidly, trying to steady himself. The heavy steel door that had locked behind him earlier was now slightly open. He didn't waste a second. He ran straight toward it, shoulder slamming the gap until it opened enough for him to squeeze through. Once on the other side, he fell to his knees, gasping for air. Outside the hallway, Officer Sanchez stood frozen, holding a taser. "Hall, what the hell happened?" Marcus looked up at him, his face pale. "Block D, it's alive. Don't go in there." Before Sanchez could respond, a deafening alarm went off across the prison. Red lights flashed. The PA system crackled. "Emergency lockdown. Unauthorized cell breach detected. Solitary Block D." Marcus and Sanchez turned toward the hallway. Every door in Block D was now wide open. And then the screams began again, this time from multiple cells. Sanchez reached for his radio. "This is Unit 2. We need the warden. Something's happening in D Block." But over the radio came a voice. Not the warden's, not any officers. A whisper, clear and cold. "You opened my door." The alarms cut out instantly. The lights flickered once, twice, then every bulb shattered at once, plunging the entire block into darkness. Somewhere inside that blackness, heavy footsteps echoed, slow, deliberate, growing closer. Marcus turned toward the sound, gripping Sanchez's arm tightly. "What is that?" Sanchez whispered. Marcus swallowed hard. "That's not a prisoner." The footsteps stopped. Then something dragged across the floor, metallic and loud, like chains being pulled. Marcus's flashlight flickered one last time before dying completely. In the brief flash of light, he saw it just for a second. A tall, hollow-eyed figure at the end of the corridor, staring straight at them. Then the entire block went silent. The silence was heavy, too heavy. Marcus could hear his own heart pounding in his ears, each beat echoing against the cold concrete walls. The air smelled like rust and dust, thick enough to taste. He dared not move. Sanchez stood beside him, frozen, taser still trembling in his grip. Then came the sound again. Chains, dragging slowly across the floor of Block D. The metallic scrape grew louder, closer. Marcus whispered, "Don't move." They both stood still as the faint emergency light flickered to life overhead, bathing the hallway in a dull red glow. That's when they saw it, long, smeared footprints stretching from cell D7 all the way toward them. The footprints glistened as if wet. Sanchez's voice cracked. What is that?" Marcus crouched down, shining his dying flashlight beam across the prints. It wasn't water. It was darker, thicker. "Blood," he said quietly. Something shifted at the end of the hall. The tall figure they'd seen before was gone, but the cell doors, every single one of them, were now swinging gently back and forth, like they were being moved by invisible hands. "Hall," Sanchez whispered. "We need to leave, right now." Marcus nodded. They turned toward the exit, but the steel door that led back to the main corridor was sealed tight again. Sanchez tried the handle, pushing, kicking. Nothing. Then a voice called out softly from behind them. "Help me." They froze. The voice was faint, hoarse, coming from cell D9. Marcus turned slowly and aimed his flashlight. Inside the cell sat a young inmate, face bruised and eyes wide with terror. "Please," the man said, crawling closer to the bars. "I've been here for days. They left me here." Marcus frowned. That's impossible. D-Block's been closed since yesterday. I'm not lying, the inmate cried. You have to get me out. He's coming back. Who's coming? Marcus asked, stepping closer. The inmate's eyes darted toward the shadows behind him. His voice dropped to a whisper. Daniel. He said he needs another one. Sanchez pulled Marcus back. We're not opening that cell, he hissed. But Marcus couldn't look away. The inmate was trembling, tears cutting lines down his dirty face. Please, I heard them die. He makes us see things. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, brighter this time, and in that split second, the inmate's expression changed. His eyes rolled back, and his body went completely still. Then, with a sickening snap, his head twisted sharply to the side. Too far to be real, and he fell backward, vanishing into the dark. The light blinked off. Sanchez screamed and fired his taser into the cell, sparks flying uselessly. The air filled with the stench of burnt metal. Marcus yanked him back. Stop! It's useless. The red light returned again, dim and flickering. The cell was empty. No body, no blood, nothing. Sanchez was shaking violently. I saw him die. Hall, I saw it. Marcus swallowed hard. He was never there. The hallway groaned. The walls themselves seemed to pulse, like they were breathing. A faint rumbling vibrated under their feet, and a low moaning sound rose through the air, like wind blowing through hollow pipes.